Danny's trip to Mexico would take a surprising turn when he found a stray kitten in bad shape. Locals advised him not to touch the cat, but unable to abandon the poor animal to its fate, Danny took it back to the US with him. He was determined to nurse the cat back to health, but the police had another idea. When two police officers showed up on Danny's doorstep a couple of days later, it quickly became clear to him that he had made a big mistake in saving the cat. The moment he opened the door, the officers entered his house. Danny tried to stop them and demanded an explanation, but all they asked him was, "Where is she? Where's the cat?" It was hard to believe that the police were so worked up about a kitten he rescued while on vacation. But when one of the officers finally explained why they were looking for the cat, it all made sense to Danny. There was no way he could keep this animal. But what was wrong with the cat? Why did the police get involved? Well, we have to start from the beginning. In Mexico, Danny was having the time of his life. But when he noticed a stray kitten, he couldn't leave the poor creature behind. The cat kept meowing and purring, and it melted his heart. Oddly enough, he was the only one who felt that way. Other people walking by paid the cat no attention at all. Danny was in a small town when he discovered the kitten, and the poor thing was covered in dirt from living on the streets. It was also so weak, it was clear it didn't have a mother. The kitten was instantly taken by Danny, and it followed him for a while. When they walked into a slightly busier street, Danny noticed the cat was even more eager for attention. His first thought was to grab the kitten and take it to a shelter, but when he approached the animal, he was stopped by the locals. They were asking him not to pick up the cat or even touch it. He wanted to ask why, but his Spanish wasn't good enough to communicate. He could only understand the basics and people's body language, so Danny was in a bit of a pickle. With the kitten now climbing onto his boot, Danny decided that the locals were probably messing with him. Quickly, but carefully, he picked up the animal and walked back to his car, even though the locals were still asking him to leave the cat alone. Danny couldn't understand what all the fuss was about. The only thing on his mind was getting the poor cat some food and water. Then, he would take her to a shelter. During the process of finding food and trying to find a good animal shelter, Danny fell in love with the kitten. He quickly realized that the kitten would be better in the US, and he also didn't want to say goodbye to the cat just yet. So he decided he would take the cat back with him. Things were looking up for the cat, and with a little food in her belly, she looked a bit more lively already. As usual, it was pretty busy at the border, but everything went fine. The next thing Danny had to do was take the cat to the vet, and fortunately, he was able to get an appointment for the next day. He also decided to give the cat a name for now, so he named her Missy. One of the first things Danny noticed about Missy was that she was too curious for her own good. He constantly lost track of her because she was small enough to get anywhere she wanted. The next day, Missy was nowhere to be found, and it was time to head out to her vet appointment. Finally, he found her under the sink, but the cat was much less willing to be picked up compared to the day before. He would find out why soon enough. But before we continue, give this video a like to help it reach 7K and subscribe to the channel. Maybe it was because she had gained some strength and her survival instincts started kicking in. But every time Danny tried to grab Missy, she tried to bite him and made growling noises. Eventually, with the help of some gloves, he managed to get her into his previous cat's old cage, and they went to the vet. Danny really hoped that this change in behavior was only temporary. During the drive to the vet, it was clear that Missy was stressed and wanted to get out of the cage as soon as possible. She was hissing and scratching the inside of the cage. Danny tried to calm her down, but when he moved his hand toward the cage, she tried to bite him. When they got to the vet, Missy was so aggressive that the vet couldn't examine her carefully, and an anesthetic would be dangerous because she was so malnourished. So, the doctor instructed Danny to strengthen her up for a few days so Missy could withstand sedation and she could be safely examined. The vet even gave him a special kind of food to speed up the process a bit. What Danny didn't know was that the vet wasn't being completely forthcoming. It turns out that the doctor noticed something was off and he called the police so they could handle it. As Danny was driving back home, Missy seemed calmer. It was at that moment Danny thought it would all work out. But would it? When Danny got home, he poured the food into a bowl, but Missy took a bite, spit it out, and hid. At first, Danny thought she might still be stressed out. Unbeknownst to Danny, things were about to get a lot more stressful. Danny was looking out the window when he saw a police car with 2 officers pull up in front of his house. When they knocked on the door, he went to greet them, but before he could say anything, the officers pushed past him into the house. Danny was stunned for a second and couldn't understand why all this was happening. They were looking for something, and when Danny asked them about it, they said they were looking for the monster. The only thing that made sense was that they were looking for Missy, but how did they know he had a cat? And why were they calling her a monster? Before he could ask about it, one of the officers found Missy. Missy ran away from them, and the police had to chase and corner her. They were wearing gloves, and they had a net and cage as well, which they left on the doorstep. Then, animal control arrived. After a while, the police officers finally got hold of Missy. The cat was furious, and Danny was so confused he wanted to know what the hell was happening. One of the officers told him that they didn't really know why they were there either. They were just following orders. All they knew was that the local vet made a call, and Danny should probably get in touch with the doctor to get some answers. After the officers put Missy in the cage and carried her to the police car, Danny called the vet, but his assistant picked up, and it was clear they were expecting to hear from him. When Danny finally got a hold of the vet, the doctor explained that he had lied to Danny and hid the truth about the cat for fear that he wouldn't take the news well. In his professional opinion, it would be better if the police handled it. Why? Because the vet noticed immediately that Danny's cat was not a cat, it was a Mexican bobcat cub, and he shouldn't be in possession of one under any circumstances. Danny had not told the vet that he had found Missy in Mexico, so he had assumed that Danny acquired the animal illegally. That is the main reason the vet wanted the police involved. In addition, the veterinarian didn't want to get into a conflict with a customer, so he decided the best thing to do was to report it to the police. After all, it was illegal. Later that day, Danny was called to give a statement about how he had come into possession of the bobcat cub. His story sounded a bit far-fetched, but the police believed him. Plus, they had already searched his home and they didn't find any evidence of illegal animal smuggling practices. As a result, they didn't place any charges against Danny. It was an honest mistake. But what about the bobcat cub? Well, it was turned over to a rescue center where they would nurse it back to health and return it to Mexico eventually. This story just goes to show you should listen to locals when they give you a warning. On the other hand, the animal received the care it desperately needed thanks to Danny's actions. So, it all turned out well in the end. Let us know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel for more. Until next time.